So, good afternoon. Greetings. I'm pleased to meet you all at Ukraine Crisis Media Center. My name is Yevhen Mahda. I'm the director of World Policy Institute, and today, me and my colleagues and friends, we gathered here to have a conversation about Belarus. I will not try to hide the fact that the formal reason for us to meet is July 3rd. In modern Lukashenko's Belarus is called like the Independence Day, but Maksym will tell us a little bit more about it. I'll just tell that this is like a holiday, a hybrid holiday, I'll call it, because this is the day when Minsk was liberated from fascist occupiers, and I don't think. Well, of course, it's pretty meaningful, and all adequate people will agree that it really has a significance, the day when any settlement is liberated from fascists or other occupiers. But turning this day into Belarus Independence Day, this whole transformation itself, in my opinion, is a weird trick, a weird maneuver, but okay, I'm not speaking of that. I want us today to talk about political and economic situation in the country, which is our unknown neighbor, unfamiliar neighbor. More than 1,000 km of border we share, but we don't know so much about each other. And our current relations, they reflect this condition. Diplomatic relations between Ukraine and Belarus are still there, like they do exist, but the Ukrainian ambassador was dismissed, Kazim, in Minsk. So this dismissal is more of a political one. The new ambassador, it's obvious, will already shake hands with the new president of Belarus. It's obvious. And we can see the double threat from Belarus. So deployment of nuclear weapons there and possible, not deployment maybe, but Wagner mercenaries emergence there. So this is something that has been troubling us for like more than 10 days and other neighbors of ours. And of course, the issue related to subjectivity of Alexander Lukashenko. Is he actually a subject or not? I am too impolite. I did not introduce the speakers of this meeting. Tetiana Gatsura-Javorska, representative of CSO called Zvyano. We have Maksym Pleshko with us, the founder of Center of Belarusian Communications, and Vadim Kabanchuk, deputy commander of Kastus Kalinovskyi Regiment. So we have a very good balance here to talk about social, political, and military issues. So I pass the floor to Ms. Tetiana, please. You're so welcome. Okay, what do you see today happening in Belarus? So, already mentioned a lot of what my colleagues presented, that Belarusians basically are the hostages. The decisions made in Belarus, these are not supported by the majority of Belarusians. And we are the hostages. We're taking as hostages. We have the leadership, which basically seized the power in 2020, the so-called leadership. And I think I'd like to stress more on another aspect of Ukrainian-Belarusian relations. The reparation talks that Belarusians have to be responsible for what's happening. I fully agree with this statement. Belarus is a country. We as citizens of this country are fully responsible for what is happening, that our country has become a co-aggressor. Still, when we have this dispute on reparation and responsibility, when this discussion is held, people forget about this thing, that reparation basically and certain responsibility can only be held by democratic, free Belarus. Lukashenko, in any case, will not willingly pay any reparations. He will never agree that Belarus is responsible for what's happening in Ukraine. For this to happen, we need Belarus to become a free, independent country. And It's impractical. So if, well, Ukrainian society has to help Belarusian CSOs and human rights activists. They can't just avoid this issue or neglect it. We really need to get Ukrainian support for Belarus to become free and be held liable for it, respectively. Thank you. Then I just really want to ask the following. The reparation issue, in my opinion, has become a cherry on the top for our current relations. And this cake, we started baking this cake like for a month ago when Pavlo Latushka paid a visit, and then the discussion activated, then Kovalevsky-Matskevich and Ihar Kizim dismissal, and then there was a discussion of the reparation. Maybe we have to perceive this as an episode in social discussion, social discourse. We can actually perceive as we just want it, but why I raise this issue? We continue repeating this, that Belarus is responsible, but Belarusian society, they feel this responsibility for what is happening. They do. Actually, they do. They share this statement. And our leaders in Minsk, the decision makers, well, for this dialogue to move further, we just have to understand that this will move only with the representatives who see Belarus as free and democratic. Okay, if you want to promote and lobby this dialogue. We have to understand that it's not the Lukashenko who will confirm this responsibility of Belarus, of his country. Neither Lukashenko nor the law enforcement and military, only the free society. Those people who really want Belarus to become democratic and an adequate, reliable neighbor of Ukraine, guaranteeing security for Ukrainian borders. Thank you. Vadim, I just want to pass the floor to you. Yes, military threats. You, as a military person, you have to objectively assess those, because I don't want to call Belarusian army the enemy for Kastus Kalinovskyi regiment. Still, it's like, let's say, a relative opponent. Belarusian army currently is one of the strongest. I can say, because the Belarusian army never took part in hostilities. But I'll just give a small historical remark on the so-called holiday that we have today. On July 3rd, we had this... The ruins are shooting. This was the Soviet Belarusian movie made in 1971, or I don't know when exactly it was released. What are the ruins? Minsk. In Minsk, there were no urban fights when the Soviet troops were retreating. There were no urban fights. Also, during the Bagration operation, when there was the offense, Soviet army destroyed it. The first premises were destroyed in 1941 in July, when the center of Minsk was mined. And the same thing they did in Kiev. In Kreshchatyk, they were exploding the houses. Then Minsk was bombed at night. In 1943, especially, they destroyed the city. In 1944, especially the central part, during the Bagration operation. The only house that actually was relatively undamaged, the so-called Domurada, because the Bolsheviks needed to have a house, like, to start their meetings. So it's just a little bit of history. This is what the holiday Lukashenko is celebrating today. When it comes to military threats, it's always there. It's permanent, because military people are planning everything based on the worst scenario. The worst scenario for Ukraine, it was February 2022, when we had these columns going to Gostomel and Kiev. This may actually be repeated when they accumulate enough power. When Wagner mercenaries will concentrate the power that they say, like approximately 8,000 people for them, they can be enhanced by a couple of tens of thousands of Russians, also a couple of thousands of Belarusian army, and this is like, and they can hit Ukraine, so this is a permanent threat. I would draw attention, in Ukraine, this is not discussed that much. Putin is a KGB leader. He loves to do everything in couloirs, and he loves to use the other country's banners for his operations. But the worst scenario, when there is an order to use the nuke, the use of the nuke, who will be called responsible? Wagner and Lukashenko for it. He will push all the liability there. For me, this is like very obvious. I don't know, but somehow in your media environment, this is not stressed. Nobody pays attention to it. Also about the reparations, Dmitro Hromakov is mostly his narratives, and Prytula, yes, they mostly talk about it. It's not that I'm standing against my own people or Belarus, my country, but I stand for justice. Okay, let's look at historical reparations in the Nazi Germany, their responsibility. Germans. They had very powerful anti-fascist movement. There were 20 attempts to kill Hitler at least. Valkyria operation. The generals were there. But what can we see in Belarus? Swamp, I call that. In 2020... according to Chatham House, approximately 1 million people went to streets all around the country. So, the law enforcement and the security services, they were acting against their people. I can't say that Belarusians are innocent, that 800 missiles hit Ukraine from the territory. So much armament. So much armament was given just to hit us there in East. I saw the elections in 1994. I saw the attitude of people, how they came to the polling stations. I would not say that Belarusians have nothing to do with it. They are responsible. Historical responsibility, historical liability should be there. Not maybe in the form... maybe not something that Hromakov and Prytula say, not in that format, but this discussion, it should be there definitely on the agenda. Thank you. So you mentioned about the nuke and Wagner guys and Lukashenko. So you do seriously consider that Lukashenko may get an opportunity to push the button? The nuke button? No. Putin will use the nuke and the HQ. But they will just blame Lukashenko and Prigozhin for that. That's it. They'll... yeah, and this is an interesting insight, an interesting option, but it's not that we want to think about it. We have to think of various options. To me, it seems that this is more... it can be like an intimidation to make our Western neighbors afraid, because frightening us after Chernobyl and regular air raid alerts, with frightening us with tactical nuke, I don't know. It's like, look, what they say. They say that they give him tactical nuclear weapons and later strategic. Why this is being done? This is like within their concept of escalation and de-escalation that Russian Federation HQ used. So that's how they want to show to the whole world that if the tactical nuke will be used, the next step is strategic, where like the global consequences are not clear. So any expert will just confirm that the whole Europe will see it being exploded in the air, like the whole hemisphere. All electronic devices will be off. So we can make such an explosion. They can make such an explosion where there will be no human victims, but this will be a very big, powerful signal to everyone. Okay, so Maksym, I know that you have your own opinion about July 3rd. You do, right? Can you share it? Yes, greetings from the Center of Belarusian Communications. Greetings to all Belarusians. So, a holiday, a day on July 3rd. July 3rd. The Moscow troops actually left Minsk, which was occupied by these, and there was another battle within previous days. In 1660, imagine. The troops of Kievan Lithuanian kingdom actually pushed the Muscovites out. So on July 3rd, 1660, Minsk was actually liberated. So congratulations with it. We're coming back to history. It's an issue of identity. It's how you perceive yourself. It affects the behavior, political behavior, and so on, as Belarusians say. So I just want to say that we've been observing since 2020, the experts, what we've been observing in Belarus, a lot of interest to the issues of identity, like who we are, what we are in the modern world. Belarusians ask themselves. I'm pretty convinced, and the issue of that war between Ukrainians and Belarusians, it's more of existential nature. We can talk for a long time, but just with simple words we can put it. We are the closest ethnically, culturally. We do not need translators. If you know history, you know what I'm talking about. 1,000 years of living in the same space. We have to be friendly neighbors in the future. Unfortunately, hostile. We are hostile today with official Minsk, but it's existential. On the other hand, the issues we discuss, things we discuss of reparations. At some point, these make Belarusians and Belarusian politicians sober. It looked like Belarusian opposition in society previously. We had it. We observed some immaturity. We've had these discussions, active Ukrainian-Belarusian discussions, for more than half a year. There was a question asked by Belarusian experts and politicians, why Ukraine is not helping us? Why Ukraine does not give us a plan? Why don't you have like a Belarusian strategy, and so on, etc. So the question is, when we also ask about reparations, I understand it's acute. I understand it will lead to discussions, but it will also lead to self-actualization, self-realization. Think about liability. We quite compare with the Nazis in Germany. Lukashenko is not Hitler, okay, but the principle is the same. De jure, the territory is provided for aggression. It's clear. It's pure. Well, officially, legally, Belarus is aggressor. For those representatives of Belarusian society who are insulted by this idea, well, please visit Irpin, my native city, and Bucha. Please talk to people who actually managed to survive. Look at those multi-storied buildings who are demolished. Everything is thousands of people don't have places to live. They ask local authorities, start recovering. There's no budget. The state does not have money to recover all that, rebuild it, and so many problems. So we will require this help to recover, definitely. And this is the subject of discussion. When Belarusian democratic community and opposition will realize this and say, okay, we require help of Ukraine. We will go, we will work with you. And, of course, for that, when we get the power, we are ready to help in this specific way to compensate it. And in Ukraine, there will be a more systemic vision on Belarus. Yes, there is a problem. Of course, Ukraine has not generated comprehensive vision, systemic vision, how to handle Lukashenko's problem. With colleagues, we're trying to generate some data, to offer some approaches, to offer it to Ukrainian structures and leaders who can generate the concept. It's subject to discussion, and it can bring us to some specific, more clear negotiations. Can I ask all of you, is it correct to speak of reparations from Belarus without getting reparations from Russia? Because in the context of this paradigm of Slavic brothers, as they call them, yeah, 3 Slavic brothers, which is deeply rooted not only in Ukrainian brains, but Belarusian brains as well. And we are saying today that, okay, we're starting from Belarus. Okay, is inside Belarusian society, will it be responded in a positive way? Will it be perceived in a positive way? For me, this is normal. It looks normal. I don't think we should say like, oh, let's first have Moscow first, then us. We have our own relations with Ukrainians in Ukraine. It may happen any time when we are capable of handling this issue, of course. So for me, it looks normal. But I agree. We should not be that like immature. We have to understand. We have to build new relations, like from the scratch, completely transform it. For this to happen, we, those who realize it, we need to have an instrument, a mechanism to build these relations. This is possible only when we get rid of regime. Yes, because, yeah, this is like the practical interest of Ukrainians. Of course, this idea of reparations will not find a lot of positive response. Nobody wants to pay money. I mean, in Belarusian society, okay, if you had 2 dictators, yeah. But the reparation issue, if we speak of Russian payment of reparations, it's already, this narrative is already in our informational field. Environment. Should Belarus be first or second? For me, this is purely technical issue. I'm pretty convinced that both dictators will sign and officially claim their defeat simultaneously. Yeah. So another issue, which is important, I think, there. The concept of Russian relation towards Belarus, the concept itself, the attitude. Don't you think that Belarus today looks like a bunny which already is devoured, swallowed by Russian snake, and now it's start actually it's already in the stomach, and yeah, we're coming more to biology. So the process of decomposition has already started. We, the Belarusian volunteers, we've been claiming that Belarus is under Russian occupation, under 2 regimes of 2 dictators. The decomposition, they've been doing this like for more than 200 years with Belarus. When Rech Pospolita was divided, remember that long ago, and Lithuanian kingdom became a part of Russian Empire and like piece of Poland. You remember that. Unfortunately, we did not have our own Halichina. Were there other conditions for Ukrainian language and religion and culture development? So this Russification machine really swallowed us all, and we had worse consequences, of course, of that process. In the information environment, we had this statement that military prosecution and law enforcement, Russian, start acting in Belarus. Northern Ossetia, other occupied territories, it only happens there, where Russia Federation occupied these territories. Yes, we have this process of gradual objectification. But what's happening in the media environment, in the society? Russian media are penetrating. Within the last 2 years, they have penetrated significantly in Belarusian media environment. Previously, it was only TV, but now it's in the internet as well. It's penetrating Telegram channels and so on. What narrative we have as a consequence? That for that audience consuming propaganda of Lukashenko and Russia, they have this narrative. There is no war. Russia is demonstrated in positive contexts like supporting financially, some exchange, some interaction is there, and it's like the level of loyalty to Russia is increasing despite the war. This is pro-Lukashenko rhetoric. We have to understand it. Previously, it was like 50-50 in previous years. I'm speaking about the survey of our colleague, Belarusian sociologist, who actually presented it recently. So we can see he claims that 50-50. Some people say yes to EU, some people say yes to union with Russia, and even the percentage of people ready, who were previously ready, 5% before 2020 to join Russia, now it's 8.5%. So somehow they made this North Korean version of information acquirement, limiting alternative options for people. No alternative sources are accessed of information. So they do their job. They're cutting the national memory because we are speaking of some legal issues. There was the Belarusian Russian Regions Forum. It took place in Russia. In recommendations, they adopted some provisions. So they recommended to have a joint curriculum on history delivery. Belarusian historians are trying to oppose this because if you're a professor in the university or a teacher, you still understand that Lithuanian Kingdom and Moscovia, these were competing subjects, and telling that we took you from Lithuanians, they still continue changing the reality. They are distorting the history, distorting the reality. In this context, if we summarize, in these conditions, difficult conditions, when we have occupation and influence, still there is a process of Belarusian nation shaping. It's there, and all these challenges are catalysts somehow. Somehow they slow down it in some aspects, but Belarusian society and Ukraine should somehow promote the national identity strengthening. Belarusians have to start understanding that we are living in European geopolitical space. We're not part of Russia. If we take it in a simplified way, Kievan Rus is our grandmother of all of us. And Lithuanian and Kievan Kingdom, this is our mother. So Moscovia, for all these centuries, they were trying to occupy, to seize us. So national identity is important for us in any way. Belarusian issue will be solved in Ukraine at the battlefield. When Russia is disintegrated, we will have so many solutions for Belarusian issue. I do hope that this happens. I do wish our leaders and Western partners in our army, I really want our Western partners to give us the aircraft and all the weapons. If it happens, but it may be delayed, it's worse. Development of Belarusian national identity is in the interest of Belarusian people, Ukraine, and all European neighboring states. This is one of the postulates of our center. We constantly repeat it, and we will promote it, of course. Colleagues, I really want to mention this issue. Prigozhin in Belarus. Yevhen Prigozhin in Belarus. Okay. This is a myth to me. It looks like a myth to me that he is actually staying there less than an hour. His jet stayed there for less than an hour. He had some close conversation with Lukashenko. Presence of Wagner mercenaries in some significant number is a myth. And what is also a myth is that they somehow can affect the situation. Can you confirm or refute my words? So can you just... so far we don't have specific data that the Wagner staff is there. We can only see these tents, the camp, and we counted like how many potentially people can be deployed. There are approximately 8,000, yeah, can be deployed. So on the one hand, Wagner mercenaries, when we take them as just mercenaries, declassified, yeah, marginalized, they of course can play their role, even the positive one, for some changes in the region. We can buy them, you know, we can pay them more. The question is, who will pay more, us or others? If you remember 2020, the Wagner case, they were arrested. They're like 50 Wagner or 33 Wagner mercenaries were arrested in Belarus. He said that 200 of these are running around the forests. Yeah, Belarusian KGB is still trying to capture them. And then Lukashenko was very afraid, you know, in 2020. He was so intimidated because after that we saw the anti-Russian turn of Lukashenko's propaganda in 2020. So it was clear that there was some negotiation with Putin. Putin said, Alexander, don't worry, you'll be the president. And then Belarusian propaganda turned 180 degrees. First half of 2020, Belarusian propaganda was more anti-Russian than anti-Western. Lukashenko remembers that. It's like a boomerang that can actually come to him directly and hit his head. Okay, thank you, Tetiana. No? Okay, so in my opinion, we don't have to rely on hypothesis that all PMC Wagner staff, that all of them will come from Russian territory to Belarusian territory. To me, it seems like very unrealistic. I guess we have the separation effect. It's more realistic what Lukashenko said, that instructors, we have to understand that even 1,000 of instructors, Belarusian army, it will be hard to devour, let's say. It will be hard to find so many military to be trained. Respectively, it creates certain problems. Plus, considering that 80 kilometers from the camp to Drozdy residence, well, we may have different options. So we just have to note and agree with Vadim. Initially, he said that the presence of Prigozhin and a couple of people close to him who know how to build this military structure, it may evolve in some serious threat. So what we need for it, just the political will, basically, and a wish. Please don't forget that we don't know which negotiations are between Prigozhin and Lukashenko, if they negotiated on something. While Lukashenko, Prigozhin can use the equipment, military equipment and weapons. In Belarus, still there are tanks and artillery and air defense. If there's a wish, if there's negotiation, Prigozhin can deploy a unit with Lukashenko's support. But recently, Lukashenko, at one of his big meetings, was calming people down, saying that they are, all those prisoners died, only good Wagner guys will come. So he's calming his establishment down. It looks like he's calming himself down because it looks like he's terrified. Now he knows that he's playing with fire. So we just have to remember, like Lukashenko said, they don't know everything. They know everything about offensive and defensive tactics, but they also know how to attack and how to march for capitals. So he didn't mention that. We'll see. We'll see how it evolves, how it changes. I just want to ask our Belarusian colleagues, because how I see it, how I realize it. In summer 1994, 29 years ago, after Kuchma and Lukashenko became presidents of two countries, we started this separate parallel movement of Ukraine and Belarus. Based on your observations, maybe you know something, you talk to Belarusians. Currently, how do they perceive the situation in Ukraine? Not just the war. Did this opinion change, or it was more or less the same all the time? We just have to understand that I have my own bubble, some circle of people I talk to, and yeah, a bubble, as we call it, yeah, a personal bubble. And I talk to people inside this bubble. This will not be representative. This will not give an objective vision, okay, of what the attitude of people is. With people I talk to, if we take them, yes, of course, they first of all are very sympathetic towards Ukraine. They try to help with everything they can. They're afraid that the situation may lead to the following: the Russia may devour, swallow Belarus, completely. And I heard these things like, oh, God forbid something happens to Lukashenko, they will put their own, they will put some Russian guy, and we will completely lose our independence. People are afraid of this, by the way. This is what I hear in my bubble. This is what people express. All the time I read the results of surveys carried out in Belarus, and of course attitudes are different. They change. And partially what I was personally told, the same thing I've seen in the results of surveys when Lukashenko's rating is increasing because of there's war in Ukraine, and they think like, okay, we don't have this war in Belarus. If not Lukashenko, then we would have the war. So they somehow make it his achievement. What I read, like these sociological surveys, these are the attitudes, with war in Ukraine as a background. I'm pretty skeptical towards sociology in this concentration camp called Belarus. It's hard for me to tell about attitudes because since 2014 I've been in Ukraine. But what I know definitely that in Belarusian society, even at genetic level, I can say there is a fear. People are afraid of the war. We had horrible wars when up to 50% of people were destroyed in the country. In 17th century, 51 or 49% of Belarus were like destroyed. Were killed. So Belarusians are afraid of war as a concept. I know the attitudes in Belarusian army because my close relative was demobilized recently, and he says that they have a very strange attitude. That when they are ordered to go to Ukraine and to fight, they are pretty sure somehow that they somehow individually, each of them thinks that they will avoid it. For me, it's among the officers, low-ranked and mid-ranked officers, they have more sympathy towards Ukraine because this myth about brotherhood, Russian brothers, is already destroyed. And all that bravery they've seen in the movies, and breaking bricks on the head and washing in fountains, it didn't help Russians in Ukraine, yeah? So first they were shocked. Yeah, of course, Belarusian officers were shocked, and later they realized that Russia will not win in Ukraine. By the way, an interesting event related to it. When we had these burning columns, we didn't manage to reach Kiev, some people started saying that, oh, Belarusian army is not ready to enter Ukraine. We will never invade Ukraine. I will not give you surnames, but this was like the regime's maneuver. Okay, another question, which is really interesting. It's well known that after the dramatic events of 2020, hundreds of thousands of Belarusians came to Ukraine. They fled to Ukraine, not because of big love because of visa-free regime. It was easier to leave instead of getting Schengen visa. They didn't want to go to Russia, for example. Respectively, after February 24th, 2022, many left Ukraine. It's true. Many Belarusians. Periodically, we have these card blockages blocking the cards of journalists and volunteers. Governmental decisions. We sometimes have that these post-mortem payments are not actually, cannot be given to Belarusian citizens. So I will ask Belarusian colleagues, is there a consolidated opinion? Is there a specific figure, a specific person in Ukrainian power system that you talk to, that you communicate, or at least you try to communicate, someone you try to convince? Who is the Ukrainian liaison officer when we speak of Belarusian issue? Okay, do we have someone, a figure? I can't name one person. There's no such single representative, a Ukrainian representative who would advocate Belarusians, I would say that. In public, well, Yevhen Mahda, in public discourse, it's Yevhen Mahda. Okay, if we talk about amendments in legislation and solving Belarusians' problems, I don't know if there is such a figure. I talked to a person in media, for example. I have conversations who used to work in Ukrainian embassy in Belarus. I've known him for years. I have conversations with some MPs, but I'm this is more like a free flow. There is no basically communication, no consultations. For example, and I don't always understand if there's practical sense, because in Ukraine we have some good experts, Belarusian doctors. So recently we've had this decision on diploma validation canceled, and right now Belarusian doctors simply cannot work in Ukraine. So I don't understand. Okay, if these people are already in Ukraine, they work, they pay taxes, they work in hospitals with injured people, I mean Belarusian doctors. We can understand that there are emotions, yes, but practically, in practical sense, there's no practical sense in that. My organization, we've been and we are today supporting Ukrainian hospitals, and we deliver equipment, evac systems to evacuate the injured, and we have 24 of such equipment sets delivered each 3-4 months in the hospitals. We bring some expendables there because it's sterile, single use. So in Kropivnitsky, in the regional hospital, we have the head of the unit, and in May 2022, I brought equipment. Then it was September, then it was winter, and last time I went there in May 2023. And excuse me, at 2 p.m. I can see that a person, every time I come there, I see that he's getting more and more tired. A year ago, this person was very positive and optimistic, saying we'll cure people, and now this person's really, I can see the fatigue. Yeah, I know it's so hard to be a doctor, and now I know that, now I find out that Belarusian doctors staying here for 2 years right now, they will leave because they can't be employed legally in Ukraine. So, coming back to the issue, I don't know if there is such a figure, I don't know anyone who could advocate. and find the balance. When Ukraine as a state is demonstrating its protest and canceling some decisions and breaking the relations with Belarus, but there is practical help, actual help from Belarusians who stay in Ukraine right now and who help and support us to fight these consequences of Russian aggression. It seems to me that we could have done it better. You could have done it better, actually. Thank you, Vadim. Unfortunately, yes, we have sort of discrimination. And at the level of regiment, we had meetings with the Human Rights Office, with the Ukrainian Ombudsman. We had Mr. Lubinets, yes, Dmitro Lubinets. And we raised the issue. We talked to Ukrainian MPs about that like 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, our boys, you know, they couldn't go to rotation to Europe because they had, because of the passports. But I understand. They had some problems. I understand that Ukrainian services are just, you know, exhausted because of that load they have. And hundreds of Belarusians still are in the country. We try to help Ukraine, but on the other hand, yes, we are representatives of the aggressor state. We have to understand the roots of that, you know? We have to be sympathetic to it. We have defendants with Ukrainian military tickets with their accounts blocked because they had business in Ukraine before the full-scale war, and we still can't do anything. Unfortunately, we have what we have. Thank you. If there are questions from our audience, it may happen so. Thank you, Michal Potocki. I'm the Polish journalist. I'd like to ask our Belarusian guests about the recent words of Danilov, Mr. Danilov, that maybe the Lukashenko's role in future negotiation, potential role of Lukashenko in future negotiation with Russia. How can we explain that? Do you actually believe in that option? Who said that? I didn't hear. Danilov, Alexei Danilov, Defense and Security Council of Ukraine. He wrote that on Facebook, on his page. I'm not a political expert, I'll tell you, and I don't believe in that kind of negotiation that Lukashenko is about to take part. Maybe some agreement is there, but what we know that once we had these rockets flying, now they stopped. I think that Ukrainians maybe explain something to Lukashenko, but I don't believe that Lukashenko can ensure that negotiation process. He is the participant. He is the co-aggressor. So, no. I don't believe. I'll try to explain it from Ukrainian point of view. If you do remember, and you understand that Prigozhin's speech, we saw only the tip of the iceberg. We understand that beyond Prigozhin, we have a group of Russian elite standing there, and maybe law enforcement who are not satisfied with this and want to get out of this war, how to take Putin away, neutralize him. And Lukashenko in this situation, during the first days, he started acting as negotiator, mediator, you know, and Danilov's signal can be interpreted like this. This is the signal, potential, it's like a version. It's a signal to that part of Russian elite, looking like, okay, if you want to talk via Lukashenko, you can try. But it doesn't mean that Lukashenko is recognized by someone. In Ukraine, he is not recognized as a president. He is a military criminal, war criminal that should be in The Hague together with Putin. But in the process of dialogue, theoretically, some signals may be sent via him. Again, highly likely, or that may be a signal from the Defense and Security Council to those people standing beyond Prigozhin, but maybe. I'm not stating. This is just a version, my own. I agree with the version of Maksym. This is a game to deepen the breakage, maybe in some law enforcement and defense elites in Russia, and Danilov is just Danilov knows that Lukashenko wants to be like to be present in all the negotiation processes. He has very limited ways to participate in it, like Minsk 1, Minsk 2, Minsk 3. This is something sacred for him. I think we're about to finish. Please, oh yes, we have, yeah. Good afternoon. My name is Sofia. I'm a student of the State Trade Economic University. I have a question to Belarusian representatives. Question. If there is a possibility that Belarusians will be able to have a revolution in their country, in Belarus, for Lukashenko finally just to leave, you know, just to be replaced by someone better, to actually get rid of him and all that. When we fight and do something, we fight and do something, we have faith in something. Yes, Vadim will disagree with me. He already spoke of that silence, that in Belarus not many things happen, that there is not much of resistance. But I do have this faith. I don't know. I somehow believe in this. This is my personal opinion of just one individual who loves. I love my country, I love my people. I still believe that we have the potential to overthrow Lukashenko. We just have to understand that by 2020, there was like a social agreement between regime and the majority of people. People ignored the issue with political prisoners. The independent media were declined. People just ignored that because they could go elsewhere to Europe. It was open, you know, the borders were open. So people got used to it. They could just live. So there was a condition like you keep silence, you make money, you live with comfort, with good roads, you live safe. And our people just overslept, you know, when the regime already created a system. Our society gave a chance for a regime to build such a strong system when this dictatorship could not be overthrown. In 2020, people believed that this was like possible, just to go to the streets and everything will happen on its own, but it didn't. At that moment, the system, the oppressive system, was strong, the law enforcement, the propaganda, everything was there. Still, I believe that this potential is hidden deeply. Despite that hundreds of thousands of people left, Belarus still, there are people who are dissatisfied inside Belarus, and enough of people who are sympathetic towards Ukraine. I don't believe in Russia, don't have faith in Russia, and it opens an opportunity for us when we have the chance. Kastus, Kalinovskyi and Regiment and Armed Forces of Ukraine, unfortunately, give their lives for this chance. They are trying to weaken Russia, and thanks to them, we may get this chance. Of course, I do believe that Belarusians will definitely say their words, and we as Belarusian volunteers, we have a strategic goal to liberate Belarus. What is the prerequisite for it? So first we have to defeat Russian Federation and destroy it. The active phase, the active hostility phase, we unfortunately have here in Ukraine. We are here, we're trying to contribute as much as we can in this victory. And maybe we will become a trigger for people to support us and we finally overthrow the dictator. So just to finish, I will repeat the statement, well-known statement. It's been there for a year that Belarusian Ukrainian people will have a 1,000-step road in front of us. We've already taken some steps to approach each other. We're demonstrating that representatives of Ukrainian and Belarusian nations can discuss some acute problems and not those which are quite, let's say, pleasant for us, but we're ready for dialogue. It means that Ukrainian Belarusian societies can, both of us can initiate and inspire that dialogue. We do not need to wait for the presidents to meet, for the leaders to meet. If it's like a president 2 or other, so we shouldn't wait for the ministerial meetings. We do not need to wait for the ambassadors to be signed. We have to dry this swamp. There's no other way. Thank you so much.